Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday, February 14th, 2023, Valentine's Day edition of the Board of Education. If everyone would please rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If the district clerk could please take a roll call.
Adam Smith,
Present.
Deborah Brooks,
Here.
Emily Bays,
Present.
Adam Block,
Present.
Julie Epstein,
Here.
Rachel Gillior,
Not present.
Nanette Melkonian.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have a motion? Ms. Brooks?
Make a motion to recess into exec session for the purpose of discussing the employment history of various personnel.
Do we have a second? Ms. Bays, all in favor? All in favor, Dr. Block? All 6-0. Thank you. We'll see everybody at 7:30. Okay. Ms. Brooks, do you have a motion?
Oh, motion to come back.
Do we have a second? Ms. Bays, all in favor? 6-0, great. I'm sorry, oh yes, Rachel's back. Good. So, which leads me to the roll call. If we could please have a roll call.
Adam Smith,
Present.
Deborah Brooks,
Here.
Emily Bays,
Present.
Adam Block,
Present.
Julie Epstein,
Here.
Rachel Gilliard,
Here.
Nanette Melkonian.
Here.
Thank you.
Great. Dr. Block, if you could please announce our musical performance of the evening.
Sure. We'd like to welcome Jenna Lean and the Weber 7th grade saxophone ensemble.
So if we have not met, this is Jenna Lean. I am the new 7th grade band teacher at Weber. Behind me is a lesson group. We work together only during school, once a week. It's a group. We're working on skills other than just our concert music together. So for Valentine's Day tonight, we've selected a tune that talks about being loyal to your spouse. So why not? An old jazz standard called Ain't Misbehavin'. Enjoy. Ready?
We're going to move on to item 6.1, which is the adoption of the agenda for today's meeting, February 14th. If we could please get a motion. Ms. Epstein, a second. Ms. Brooks, all in favor? 7-0. Great. Okay. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight on special Valentine's Day edition of the Board of Education. We're going to try to keep this meeting as efficient as possible. So with no further ado, we will go right to our superintendent report.
Thank you, President Smith. Dr. Shields, if you wouldn't mind just reviewing the enrollment report.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. The last enrollment report was calculated on February 8th. At that time, we had 5,261 students. That's 23 more students than we had this time last year.
Thank you, Dr. Shields. And once again, yes, happy Valentine's Day for those who are here in attendance physically and certainly those who are watching virtually. First, I'd like to say our hearts go out to all the students and staff who either work and/or attend Michigan State regarding that horrific tragedy. And I'd like to take actually a moment of silence if the board wouldn't mind. Thank you. Okay, well, let's move on to some positive news here. First, I want to congratulate our National Merit Scholarship finalists, and we have 4 here at Schreiber High School. We have Solomon Graff, Susanna Kaiserman, Owen Miller, and Reed Paltrow. So a big round of applause for our finalists. Incredibly proud. And the last thing I just want to mention, I want to thank, Ms. Manuel for presenting the budget. Well, she hasn't presented it yet, but she'll be presenting it in a few minutes. And this is budget presentation number 2, and I'm glad that we are starting to really talk about some of the programs that we have here. And I want the community to understand, and certainly the staff to understand, we did a lot of listening after last year's budget. And I think you'll notice 2 things in particular that stand out. One has to do at the elementary level, looking at supplies and how the district is absorbing some of the costs that parents have to expend at the beginning of the school year. And Ms. Manuel will talk about that a little more in depth. And the second has to do with adding clubs and activities for elementary students. That's something I know that's important for our elementary principals, and I know our parents and certainly our board has been advocating for that as well. So I'm happy to say that those are, not to give away all the things, but this is something that is incredibly important. Then the last thing I'd like to talk about is, clearly we understand and we know that February is Black History Month, and it's something that we celebrate certainly nationwide. And of all the things that we do within our school, clearly we know that we have been working on our diversity, equity, and inclusion portion of working with NYU Metro. And I'm happy to say we actually had a meeting earlier today. And part of that has to do with really celebrating all of the diversity within our great school district. And I just want to make note that, of course, February is Black History Month, and we are doing multiple things within our classrooms to celebrate all the history that's there. That's all I have. President Smith, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. With that, we will move on for our first community comments of the evening. This is the opportunity for the community to be heard. Great. No one wants to be heard tonight. So with that, we will move right on to our discussion item. Mrs. Manuel?
Thank you, President Smith. And just going to wait for the presentation. As Dr. Hines said, this is our second budget workshop. We're going to be focusing on the elementary school, the guidance department, and pupil personnel services. And in honor of Valentine's Day, we have a nice little heart and some of our students' artwork, which I'm always trying to look at pictures that our students have done and include that, because I think it is so important, all of the very important work that the board is is working on all goes back to students and our staff. So we have 4 budget workshops. This is our second one. Our next one is March 7th and then March 21st. April 18th will be the adoption of the budget by the Board of Education. On May 2nd, we'll have the public budget hearing. And then on May 16th, Tuesday, we will have the annual budget vote and school board election. Again, our focus is always about the portrait of a graduate, and our decisions are guided by our strategic plan. Now, the last time we met, we didn't have state aid figures yet. So I wanted to just briefly go over these and how it impacts our budget. If you can see the green line, that illustrates the foundation aid, and that reflects a $3.9 million increase, which is very significant for the district. That's actually the completion of the foundation aid. Last year, if you remember, we received a similar amount. You'll see that our excess cost aid is going down slightly, and that's really just related to, it's an expense-based aid, so that's why it's varying slightly. You'll see our BOCES aid is going up, and we did a lease for music equipment through BOCES, so that's a reason why we're seeing an increase also, and a couple of other things that we've shifted to BOCES. You'll see textbook aid has basically remained flat, as well as software and library aid. You're seeing an increase in transportation aid of about $451,000, and that's really due to the, because COVID is over, we have much more transportation costs. We're doing a lot more. The building aid is going down slightly, and that's due to a change in the way they're computing the building aid. So you'll see also universal pre-K has remained flat. We received a large increase last year. And you'll also notice at the bottom, there's a tutoring set-aside portion of about $430,000. That is what the executive proposal is, and that's really, the governor is proposing this. So we are not sure if this is actually going to stay designated as that, or they're just going to allow us to consider it as part of the total foundation aid. So that, so just in case people don't understand, there is a legislative budget that also is passed. So you have the governor's proposal, and then you have the legislative branch, and that's due April 1st. Those will be the final runs, basically. And now, looking at the tax levy limit calculation, what we do is we take last year's levy and we apply a tax-based growth factor to it. And this is provided from the Office of Real Property. And to that, we do certain things with the receivables of the pilots, and also we have capital tax levy exclusions. So the number, if you can actually see it, and if you go on the presentation, you'll see it. There's a number that's highlighted with the debt service in yellow. So currently, our tax levy could be between 1.7 and 2.3%, and this is due to the debt service. We're actually looking to perhaps do a lease for our Chromebooks and our one-to-one initiative. So Mr. Maloney was talking about it last presentation about the need to actually refresh some of our infrastructure and updates. So that's what this would be. We're still working, Dr. Feeney and Mr. Maloney and myself are trying to work out the logistics. So that's why there's a range, basically. So moving on to our elementary schools, as you know, we have 5 elementary schools, and they are from K through 5. Our first one, Sousa, we have 544 students. We have 1.5 administrators. We have about 56 teachers and 37 support staff there. So some of the things in these pictures, you'll see the students with the STEM parade. You'll see them working on the ruler charter day as well. And John J. Daly, you'll see the same thing, pictures of the PEP program and Project Lead the Way. These are all programs that the pre-K through 5th grade students have opportunities to experience. And the lessons and projects involve hands-on experiences and activities that really engage the students being collaborative and creative. You'll also see music as we experienced tonight. The students are able to perform for their families and the community and really be enriched by the experience. We also have the ruler, which is a way for students to look into the way they're feeling and how others might be feeling with like mood meters and different things like that. And at Guggenheim, we have 497 students. We have 1.5 administrators. We have 54 teachers and about 40 support staff. And again, in these pictures, you'll see one is the kindergarten reading superheroes. You have physical education. We have the STEAM parade. And these are all focused on the students and really engaging the students. And at South Salem, we have 426 students. We have 1 administrator, about 40 teachers, and about 40 support staff. And in here, you're also seeing pictures of ruler. And the budget has money in it for the ruler program and for supplies associated with it. At Manor Haven, we have about 485 students. We have 1 administrator, about 54 teachers, and about 50 support staff. And one of their programs in the morning, they have the 4th grade morning STEM. They have play days with buddies where they'll have younger students paired up with older students. And it's a nice experience for the students to have kind of like a mentor, someone to look up to. We have the kindergarten PEP coding. And you also have science that's done, hands-on science. So the major requests from the elementary schools, and the next slide will illustrate some of those line-by-line items. We're purchasing classroom furniture for the new construction, as well as the STEAM rooms. So you have Daly is having a pre-K construction done. That'll be finished. So we have about $40,000 in the budget for classroom furniture for there. Sousa as well and Manor Haven have large equipment purchases as well. We also are increasing resources for staff development and professional development. We have an additional $20,000 district-wide for the elementary school clubs. And at each elementary school, we're putting $20,000 in for classroom supplies so we can defray the costs to parents. And this slide illustrates really the large increases. So highlighted in yellow, you'll see the equipment is increasing about $50,000, and the material and supplies is increasing $117,000, which kind of makes sense because you have $20,000 for each building, which is $100,000. Then the $17,000 is really the increased supplies for like ruler and for math and focus. The textbook, you'll see that it's decreasing, but that's really due to a recoding. There were certain things in the textbook codes for software, but those are actually, I worked with Dr. Feeney to really coordinate that so that it's being taken out of the technology codes, not the individual building codes. Next, we have the guidance department. We have pre-K through 5th grade. We have 2,428 students with 6 full-time counselors. They work on things like ruler, kindness classroom push-ins. They have cyber safety parent meetings, as well as spring parent university. We have 6th through 8th grade students of 1,215 with 4 counselors and support staff of 3. So they'll do things like Beautiful Me, Weber Stars, and the WINS program. And at Schreiber High School, we have 1,618 students with 8 counselors and 3 FTEs of support staff. And there they have interactive information board. They had the opening of the Schreiber Twilight School this year. We also have Choose Your Future fairs, which was this year for the first time. They have freshman career interest inventories and a freshman learning center as well. So the guidance department has actually grown significantly in the services that they provide to students. It's not just getting ready for school, for college, or life beyond the high school. It's also looking at their social and emotional growth and their learning and what they need to support them to be successful. So they'll provide support for students to reduce anxiety, transitioning from 5th to 6th grade and from 8th to 9th grade as well. And the elementary and middle school counselors will work with the students to build a culture of respect. So major asks, it's really pretty much flat. There's one code with the contractual and others that's increasing about $4,000. And that's really to encourage more trips for the guidance counselors to go to colleges and the like for traveling. So personnel services, pupil personnel, we still have the integrated co-teaching for ICT program at the elementary school. We have increases in the BOCES placements as well as contractual services. And we continue to expand the extended school year program. So if you remember last year, we had the ICT program and it came out of the grant and into the general fund. And then we had positions that this year were being funded through the grant as well. And those funds are actually ending at the end of this year. So what I've put here is it shows you by grade level. So in the current year, we have the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. Those are coming out of the general fund. And next year, you'll see kindergarten, 1st, and 5th grade will also be coming out of the general fund. So this kind of tries to show you the difference. It's about $587,000 difference that'll be coming out of the ARPA funds into the general fund. And you can see we have 119 students that are benefiting from this program. And what this is you have one general ed teacher as well as a special ed teacher. They're co-teaching. And then you have support services for that, where it could be speech or reading. So, and actually, the pupil personnel department is going to be working with a consultant with the middle and high school to look at those programs to make sure they're in line with what's happening at the elementary school. And we also are doing training that specifically focuses on transitioning the students after they're out of a program. So the major lines that you'll see increases in are the contractual and other code. That's going up about $405,000. And that's really due to behavioral consultants that are being used as well as other services as we continue to bring more students back into the school district. The services that we need to provide for them increases. And you'll also see an increase in the BOCES services code of $600,000, which is offset by some decreases in some of the other tuition codes, but it's still an impact. And this is really due to just the changing needs of our students and the changing demographics. And then this pie chart kind of, just for people that are visual just to see where everything is going. You see contractual and other is really 41% of our budget. So as we can continue to bring students back in, we have to pay more in contractual and less in some of the tuition. So, and also you'll see the number of classified students is 951 students. And that is it. I'll take any questions.
Maybe we'll start in the middle with me today. No. Nan, do you want to start?
Thank you. I'm very happy to see the school supply and elementary clubs as part of our priorities, so that's great news. Please remind me, were the ARP funds used, they weren't out this year, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
We do still have CRISA funds that will be next year.
Okay. So the ones that are running out this year, does that impact staff at all?
Yes, so those would be the ICT staff that I kind of spoke about on that chart. So they would have to be funded by the general fund.
Okay. And was there where did we get the funds for the district-wide social worker? Was that ARP as well?
That's coming out of the CRISA funds that'll still be
Ongoing.
available next year.
Okay.
That'll be the last year. of
Okay.
next year.
Okay. That was my other question. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this, Kathy. Do you know how much we have left in CRISA funds at this point, or just a rough estimate?
I want to say it's about 600 or 700,000, but I can get those exact figures for you.
Okay, great. And are we going to see a presentation in this budget, any of the budget workshops, I guess, to see how those funds the remaining funds are being allocated? Because the community liaison was being funded by ARP. Now next year it's going to be funded by CRISA, you're saying, and there'll be a myriad of other things, I guess?
Yeah, I had it in my notes. I had it funded by CRISA, which is similar to the ARP funds, but
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, great. But we're going to see what else is funded by that again.
Sure.
Because most of that is staff, and we haven't gotten to staffing
Right,
requests
that's
yet.
correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then, just for clarification, on the ICT numbers that you gave us, those numbers are inclusive of, it wasn't just teachers, it was also, we had some additional support staffs and some counselors and whatnot that we moved in there. That's all included in those numbers as well, right?
so those numbers are estimated for if teachers were making the same exact amount of money.
Mhm.
So it's an estimate, so the actual teachers that are being taken out, it may be slightly more, but it is the teachers plus additional speech and reading.
Okay, fantastic. And then regarding the cost for the consultant and the additional training, do you have any numbers on those? You said that that's part of that $405,000 change, correct?
Yes, that is.
Okay,
I can get you the exact amounts.
that'd be great. Okay, great. Wonderful. And then can you just go into a little more detail on that BOCES services at those are for, does that include any of the summer programs or I mean, I know you said it was the changing needs of students, so it's just our changing needs just in general through the year, or?
So those are for placements at BOCES. So if we don't have programs in district,
Mhm.
we send them to BOCES.
Got it. Thank you. And then last but not least, I think I heard you mention how, again, our contractual has increased, but our tuitions are going down. So one of the big questions we were talking about is when we implemented the ICT program, were we going to see something like that? Is that the rationale by why those tuitions are going down? We've had an influx into our ICT classrooms because we've offered these services?
So I'm going to attempt to answer it, but if Stephanie wants to add any, actually, would you like to? Okay, thanks.
I'll take that, Kathy. Yes and no, Julie. Some of it, as we move our students into the inclusion program, it would open up spots in our RISE program and our TLC or INVEST programs. So it all kind of works backwards. And we move students from out of district potentially into some of those spots that have been vacated by students that are appropriate for the ICT program.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm sorry, I did have one more question, just because it does fall under PPS, but maybe this is also coming later. All of our social workers, that will be part of our staffing conversation, not part of this conversation, correct? Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Nan, did you have another one? You want to jump in? Go ahead.
With the BOCES services, that includes the CTE students as well, the students that go to career technical education?
No, that figure does not. This is just for special needs placement.
Okay.
Right.
Thank
Those,
you.
I'm sorry, but just for clarification, that comes out of a high school code, because those are high school students.
Thank you. I have a couple. I'm just going to page through. First, just a clarification on the range you gave us on the tax cap. I know you said it's a range because you're looking at the leasing of Chromebooks. Am I right in thinking the leasing the Chromebooks brings our cap number down? And the other logistics you're looking
It
at? Or can we
actually
not be that
brings the cap
specific?
up.
Oh,
So
interesting.
if we didn't, the debt service is actually excluded from the cap. So instead of making a purchase, if we could do a lease, we could have the lease payments as debt service, and then you could actually purchase about $5 million or $4 million worth of Chromebooks.
Okay, thank you. I'm assuming we're probably going to be hearing a lot more about that as you figure out what the best course is.
That's correct.
All right, so I'm not going to dig further on that. On the various elementary schools, do these things that are highlighted reflect what the elementary principals think the priorities are to fund for additional funding for the elementary schools?
Yes, I did speak with them about all of this. They definitely, the ruler is very important to them. Just really the emotional learning that the students are doing and the hands-on experience was something that came through very significantly. And also funding furniture for the STEAM labs that we're putting into place and all the construction that's happening.
Okay.
We've taken a look at all of the codes, and I know Dr. Feeney has worked with them as well, looking at professional development and growth.
I know the STEAM rooms have been sort of an evolving presence, right? We just built them, they're new. I think they're not all built yet. But in addition to the physical plant of the rooms and the physical furniture in the rooms, we have this issue of what is happening in the rooms. I know that's not your area, but I'm assuming there's some coordination going on as we're furnishing them behind the scenes of what we're going to do with the rooms as well, right?
Correct, and the principals are really an integral part of that, but also Mr. Maloney is working also to make sure we have the correct infrastructure and the whiteboards that are necessary, and just making sure we have everything set up properly so it can be effective.
Okay, great. On the elementaries as well, this 20,000 in district-wide clubs is a change, and a big change. I'm assuming at some point we'll hear in a little more detail about that.
Sure. So in regards to the clubs, we have a lot of work to do there, really figuring out where the funding from a lot of the clubs is coming from, how many clubs exist, and making sure there's equity among the different grade levels and things. So we definitely have some work to do on that, but we wanted to put funding aside to make sure we address it.
I think that's great. I mean, this is an area where parents have been talking for years about hoping to bring back clubs, which we used to have in this district many years ago. So thank you for those. And these don't include any staffing issues at any of these areas except for the ICT, right? So we'll hear further about.
That's correct.
Okay. Let's see. You mentioned the increase in budgeting for travel for guidance counselors to go to colleges. Is that with students?
There are some with students, but this is mostly for them to actually go and establish relationships with the universities, with the admissions.
Okay. And then my last question, the ICT consultant that is mentioned here, I know you said in response to Ms. Epstein that we're going to get numbers on it. But this ICT consultant, I know we've had an ICT consultant that we've been paying out of the ARP funds for the last couple of years as we get the ICT program up and running. Is that the same consultant? And we're talking about keeping them on for another year to try and align the elementary with the middle school and the high school?
Yes, that's correct. And before, when I said in the contractual code, there's a large increase, that was for a behavioral consultant, which is different from the ICT consultant. Because the behavioral consultant works with the students about managing their behavior and what they can do. So that increase, I don't want to confuse anyone. Okay, yeah.
Sorry, that's in the contractual and other code?
Yes,
That's the behavioral consultant.
right.
So where is the funding for the, I mean, actually, I guess if you said you're going to get us the numbers, that's not on this chart yet, right?
Sure. Stephanie, is the funding for the ICT consultant, is that out of grant funding?
We have to double check it. Some of it might be, and some of it might have been on the ARPA funds also. Not 100% sure.
This might be a question actually for Dr. Allen. Is that a change in plan? Because I thought last year in our budget discussions, our plan was to keep this consultant for this year, and then we thought we would be done with them. Am I wrong? Am I misremembering, or is this we've reassessed and we think there's an additional need to keep them on for the other year, the next year?
We don't need to keep him on as much at Sousa, but as we move into the Weber and the Schreiber models, we will need to keep him on. So that's not a change from mine. Maybe it wasn't discussed last year because we were focusing on elementary, but now that I'm working on the alignment with Weber and Schreiber, I will need him there as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so thank you for this. On the, my questions focus on the ICT program. So these numbers of students, this is the number of students total in the classroom. Is that correct? It's not the total number of students who are receiving the services?
Correct. It's the
Special
total enrollment for that class. So it's the general education students and the special education students total.
Is there, are you looking to increase the number of children receiving the specific ICT services in any of the classrooms, or the classrooms at their maximum limit?
The class maximum is whatever the grade level cap is. So if there could be more students in the class because they're not at the cap, we can do that. In terms of special education students, it's always, we keep it at 2/3 gen ed, 1/3 special ed.
So is there room in any of these classrooms, any of these numbers, because I don't see all of them hitting the cap, to increase it? And is there do we have students who could be put into those classrooms?
I don't know off the top of my head if all of the special education seats are full in all of those classes, if that's what you're asking. I believe there are spots, and we are assessing as we go into annual review for students to go into each of those classes that are classified students.
Thank you. And so do I understand correctly that tuition has gone down about $100,000 because those students are able now to move back into the district in one of the programs that the district offers. Is that because before this, there was no room for those students? Or they've, I guess they've, I don't know if progressed is the right word, I don't know what the right terminology is, but they no longer need to be placed in a more private school or a different school setting, and so they are ready to move back.
Yes, that's the short answer. Part of the process that we have in PPS is starting in November. We start planning for the upcoming budget cycle. We have people that go out and do some observations in the out-of-district placements, whether it's BOCES or the private schools, to see who may be ready to return to district. So every year we do have students that come back because they don't necessarily require that same level of support as they did in the past.
But when they come back, so I'm looking at this 9.8% increase in the behavioral consultants, when the behavioral consultants are specifically for the children who are coming back? I just want to make sure I understand.
So I'm just going to take this one. Excuse me. You'll notice the increase with behavior consultants, and I think it's no surprise. This year, we've had a host of students who are struggling behaviorally, most notably at our elementary levels in many of our elementary schools. And so what we're trying to do is really prepare for the supports that will be necessary for next year. So it's not just about students who may be coming back from out-of-district placements. It's about for the students who are struggling in some capacity as far as their behaviors are concerned. So we want to provide that extra support, and we're anticipating we will need that for sure.
So it's also for students who have already who are already in the district. It's a combination. The reason I ask is because I believe in the governor's budget proposal, was there something about districts now being responsible for all the special education expenses? Did I misunderstand? Was there some shift that's becoming more permanent?
Yes,
And
so
so that's why
one of the proposals, some of it's already gone into effect with the state-supported schools that we have. In the past, they might have been more funded by the state, but they are passing that along to the school districts. So in other words, a placement like Viscardi would be getting less money from the state, and the district would be required to pay more to Viscardi if we had students there.
Thank you, because I'm trying to understand that need, and also so the community understands that the state has shifted the financial, I don't want to say burden, let's say cost, shifted the cost onto the school district while we're still under this tax cap. Okay, I just wanted to, yeah, okay, good. And those are all the questions I have, thank you.
Great, okay, I will go next. Mrs. Manuel. So my question is, first one is regarding the slide with the state aid picture. Can you just remind me what's expected for 24-25 as it relates to foundation aid?
So for 24-25, we're expected to have the foundation aid be flat, basically. And if there's an increase in CPI, that could increase it slightly. But as things for the district change, if we have a lot more students come, that could be an adjustment to foundation aid as well. But it should remain flat because we will be totally funded by then.
Because I remembered some talk about after that settlement was made last year that there was a potential that they might revert it back. Was there? Am I remembering that correctly, or is that something that's not we're not concerned about anymore?
That's not something that my organization, that they're concerned about, because the state is getting a lot more revenue from other sources. I think the concern was that if the federal funding stopped, like the rescue money that was received, that New York State would have a big hole. But they're saying that Hochul seems very positive that our budget is in a good place and that we're not going to be concerned about the federal problem.
Got it. I was just wanting to make sure that we weren't going to be committing to things this year and then next year would have the rug pulled out from under us. It sounds like we're not great. I also remember at the first budget workshop, you showed us a scale of kind of the increasing revenue and expenses, and you didn't have this full state aid picture. What would that same scale look like today if you showed it to us with what we know today?
It would be very similar. We still have, what came in with the state is very similar to what we were thinking we were going to get. So looking at the debt service for purchasing the one-to-one initiative, that would actually help us because it would take $1 million that would now be in debt service. So that would help balance things a little more.
Okay. Would you mind keeping that and updating that on this presentation for each?
Sure.
Just so we can kind of track how that changes over the season. Thank you. That was very helpful. Sorry, I'm turning with my speaker on. Regarding the supplies and what you have in the budget for the supplies, how much of what the students are currently bringing would be included? Like, has that been vetted fully in terms of?
We're working on that right now. We had a lengthy meeting in response to, this very issue, the principals, and there'll be significant trimming. Parents will still need to pick up some supplies. There's some things that, make the experience unique and special for students. Pick up some notebooks, binders, things like that. But certainly, things like paper towels, Kleenexes, wipes will no longer be on the list, and we'll be getting rid of some other items as well that are common classroom supplies.
Perfect, okay. So it's fair to say that, but the aim is really towards things like paper towels and wipes, and not necessarily that we would be totally eliminating bringing your own school supplies, correct?
We would not totally eliminate all school supplies.
Perfect. Okay. And last one, regarding the guidance department and the additional funding for trips, is, can we get a sense of like how much additional trips they can do with $4,000? Like, is that a meaningful? We heard from Mrs. Director at the previous meeting how important that was. I just want to get a sense of if $4,000 actually makes a dent in that need.
The purpose of the trips really is to do this in a strategic manner, really, as we discussed in that presentation, directing the trips and the efforts to schools where students have struggled to get in, and where we feel that helping to reestablish that connection, especially with all the turnover in the college admissions offices, having that face-to-face would be helpful. So 4,000, you've got 9 counselors, it'll make a difference. If we can provide more, we can do that. But right now, we're certainly having some college trips is helpful. We're already doing some, so this would be additional trips.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you for all our administrators who've been working on this. A lot of my questions have already been answered, but I just want to point out that a lot of what I'm going to be asking for is going to be really more personnel related, so I'm going to wait for those conversations as we get on. The one thing that I appreciated, Kathy, the way you were able to point out the number of students in each of the elementary schools and the amount of teachers and administrators that are in each of our elementary schools, and there are some, to me, that stand out more than others, and so I'm going to wait until we get to that, but I'm going to ask a question with regard to the state aid picture. You briefly touched upon the tutoring set-aside. I know later on this evening, the board is planning on discussing, as part of the legislative task force's discussion, the discussion about the tutoring set aside and what we as a board would like to advocate for. Could you, Kathy, please explain to everybody now what the tutoring set aside, is that supplementing the foundation aid? Is it supplanting the foundation aid number? And what exactly does that mean, would that mean for Port Washington?
Sure, so what that means is it's a set aside. It can't supplant what we're currently doing. It has to actually be in addition to what we're doing for students that we identify as not being able to meet the state standards. And that's for reading and math in grades 3 through 8. So it's really limiting what schools can do, because some schools are actually already addressing that because they see that it's because of COVID. We've had a lot of learning loss. But to say that you need to provide 30-minute sessions of high-impact tutoring, I don't know that that's effective, and I don't think a lot of schools think it's effective, because if you don't have a lot of students that are identified as failing to meet the state standards, say you only spend $100,000 of that $400,000, what happens? You know, so the foundation aid, making the district whole, that's what we were promised, and now they're trying to put strings on the set aside. So that's where various groups are very upset that the governor has proposed this. While we understand it's all about helping students, we think each school understands the needs of their students differently and can actually provide that in different ways, whether it's emotional support or, you know, there's different ways, like do you need social workers to address different things that students are missing? I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Okay, I just have one question, and it's on a subject near and dear to my heart, elementary school clubs. So I was happy to see the 20,000 allocation. And I know that we're not talking this week about staffing, but I'm assuming that the 20,000 is essentially for staffing clubs as opposed to for something else, correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mrs. Manuel, and whoever else contributed. Great. All right, so let's move right on to committee reports, starting with Ms. Gilliar.
Sorry. So we have two policies on for first read this evening, our gifts policy and our transportation policy. The committee is unanimous in being good with these policies. The gifts policy was subject to much conversation in committee. Anybody's free to go read it, watch it, really. But I think the committee is happy with the language we ended up with, as is the administration, and I think the parent leaders who were there were happy too. We think it communicates what it needs to, which is what's going on the ground here already, which is we weigh every gift and we make sure that they're applied fairly, but we collaborate with the donor to make sure that what the donor intends is honored as well. And the transportation policy, it's really changes that were advised by our Director of Transportation and by Mrs. Manuel to help them out in their day-to-day operations. The other important thing to note is that we will be adding a transportation handbook, which is not a Board of Ed initiative and not part of the policy. The Director of Transportation has been doing it, but when we put the policy on for second read, hopefully that will be ready to be added as well so that the public can see it, and then it will be distributed to parents, which is great. Our next meeting is on March 1st at 9:30 in the annex.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Gilliar. Ms. Epstein?
Yes, for budget and facilities, we just had a meeting, and we had some special guests there from Renew Energy Solutions. For the board members that were unable to attend the meeting in person, I placed the pamphlet that we received from Renew at your seat so you can review it. This is the first conversation in a number of conversations regarding our energy performance contracts. We don't really have a recommendation at this time, but I just wanted to provide a quick update that we do have some action that was taken. Mr. Graham is going to be providing an update to the board in the packet outlining Renew's proposal, what they can do, and any other considerations that we need to take into place, as well as the RFP process that went through to his recommendation for Renew. Then there will also be a proposal for an investment audit, which will also be explained by Mr. Graham in the packet, but that would be the next step if we want to move forward with such a company. They would go through an extensive audit which has a cost, which has a price tag associated with it. And if we do want to move forward as a board, they would put that on for the March 7th BOE meeting for our approval. But this way we'll have time to review it, digest it, and we have invited the Renew company to come to our March 7th BOE meeting so that all board members will have the opportunity to ask any and all questions after reviewing Mr. Graham's packet. And lastly, that's actually the last part, we invited them so you could go through the proposal. Hopefully the board is on board with that update and that moving forward, yes? Okay, wonderful. Our next meeting is March 13th at 9 a.m. and guess what? We'll be discussing the budget.
Do you want to do audit while you have the mic on?
We have not yet met. We are waiting to meet and we might be changing our date, so we'll keep you informed, TBD.
Exciting updates. Thank you very much. Ms. Melkonian.
The curriculum committee has not met since our last meeting. Our next meeting will be Friday, March 3rd, and we will be discussing the PEP review.
Thank you very much. Ms. Brooks.
Okay, thank you. So regarding the legislative task force, the first item under public content is I'm coming to the board as chair of the legislative task force to ask the board to approve this letter that was drafted and I have attached here so everybody can see it. And this letter arose because out of a meeting that the delegation had with legislator Georgie Whitten, who understood the issues that we were describing and our concerns about the electric school vehicle mandate. And her office drafted the letter. I then received that draft over the weekend, turned it around to fellow board members, to Ms. Manuel and Dr. Hines. And yesterday, and I thank everybody for looking at it over the weekend, and yesterday we came to an agreement as to what the draft should look like. And in essence, it would be Port Washington School District School Board in conjunction with our county legislator and any other school boards that might want to join in, but with Port Washington leading the way on letting our elected officials in Albany know the pitfalls that we see with the electric vehicle mandate. We understand it's important to combat pollution, to get rid of the fossil fuels as much as we can, the diesel, especially with respect to the school buses, but there are some issues with the program that the legislature has already mandated, is already in effect. And we have to be, by July 1st, 2027, that's when we have to begin with the purchases or leases of new vehicles that are zero emissions. And that's going to be here, as we all know, before we know it. So I won't read the whole letter because it'll take up too much time, but it's basically all the priorities that the board has previously discussed and approved that came up from the legislative task force after Ms. Manuel explained, especially what her organization sees as many of the issues. So the impact upon regional utilities, the budgetary impacts upon school districts, especially because of the tax cap, and the need for comprehensive guidance from our legislators and the state education department with how are we rolling this thing out, really, feasibly and fiscally and so forth. So I had asked everybody on the board to please read the letter before coming here today. There shouldn't be any surprises in the letter. It really is what has been discussed in the legislative task force and the priorities that I outlined here for the board back in November that the board approved. And so I'm coming to the board with the recommendation that we sign on to this letter. We send it back to our county legislator, I reach out to the presidents of our quadrant school districts, ask them if they want to sign on. I don't know what their process is. I know what ours is, and get this out soon. So that's my recommendation.
Is anybody not on board with the letter? Okay, we're approved.
So the formal
Does it
approval.
have to be
Okay,
form-
great.
I don't,
Okay,
I don't
great.
think it has to be. yeah.
So number 2 is the request to ask, so we've already discussed the significance of the high-impact tutoring set aside. It's basically, we didn't really receive our fully funded foundation aid because the set aside is not allowing us to use that $436,000 at our discretion, which is the nature of foundation aid. So it's really foundation aid with strings attached, which really isn't foundation aid. So I'm asking the board to tell me if we think, or even maybe Ms. Manuel would want to make a recommendation, if we think that the set aside should be we think that arguing or urging or advocating that the set aside not be a mandate, that we be allowed to use it as our discretion. Do we want to add that or subsume it within the foundation aid discussion with our elected officials and ask them not to make it a mandated set aside? Did I capture that accurately? The choice, well, there's really only one choice. Do we agree that we don't want the set aside to be mandated, that the set aside really is not in the spirit of fully funding foundation aid? And do we want then to say, this is part of the greater foundation aid discussion for getting fully funded foundation aid? And should we go back to our legislators and say, this is unacceptable because we are advocating for fully funded foundation aid, but you've put strings on it. And we don't like, we think those strings are unfair.
Adam, can I ask a question to Ms. Manuel? So Kathy, the $436,000 is, actually the other way around, I'm going to say $3.991 million that we received in foundation aid. Is that the full funding of foundation aid that we were owed?
Yes,
Is the $436,000 taken out of that 3.991?
that's correct, yeah.
Okay, so back to Ms., so Deborah, your question is, we've been taking $436,000 is missing from our fully funded foundation aid. Do we as a board agree that we should be advocating that we should have the $436,000?
That's the question. Does anybody not think that we should do that? Because I think we should. Yeah, so we're going to do that as well.
Yes?
Okay.
Of course, it's
And
part of
number
it.
3?
And
You got
number
you're 2
3,
for 2. Let's go for
I
3.
got to pull, and I have a feeling this will be 3 for 3. So as
Not
when.
so fast.
It's a majority vote, right? So when we met with County Legislator Dirigi Whitten, and I won't go over that, I won't debrief the board on that whole thing because I'll do that with the legislative task force, but one of the action items that came out of that was she actually asked us if we would attend, at her invitation, if we would attend the Nassau County Legislative Full Meeting that's coming up on February 27th to speak about the electric school vehicle mandate in front of the full legislature. And also, she told, when we told her about our need for funding for mental health for our students, County Legislator Dirigi Whitten said, well, there's an opioid settlement that is just kind of sitting there right now, not being used, and wouldn't it be great if we could urge the county executive to release some of those funds for the purpose of mental health services? And so she asked us also if we would come and represent our school board, our school district, at the full legislative meeting to urge the county executive to earmark, release some of those funds for mental health services. So it could be not permitting us to go at all, permitting us to go to speak about only the electric school vehicle mandate, permitting us to speak only about the opioid settlement, but my request on behalf of the delegation is as written, to be able to speak about the electric school mandate and about the funding mental health services.
So I'm okay with the electric school vehicle piece, but the opioid settlement money, I feel uncomfortable recommending that that money go away from opioid settlement, to treating opioid addiction.
Just to clarify, Adam, that's not what the legislator asked. She was pointing out that there is this settlement money and that there are mental health facilities, and she gave us actually some numbers, and Dr. Hines and Ms. Manuel were on the call, of centers that would be able to come to our school districts, and she did ask if we needed opioid money, but her point was that the money's sitting there and nothing has been done with it, and she wants urgency to the county executive to do something with the money. So it wasn't instead of, it was to get it used. Does that make sense?
It does. I feel like I would feel more comfortable if I knew more about it, to see that there really is an excess, because I don't want to vote for reallocation at this point.
I'm with Dr. Block on this one. I'm okay with the school bus piece of it, and I don't feel comfortable to take a position right now on the opioids funding. Sure.
I'm going to surprise everyone. I'm also thinking we should only talk about the electric school bus mandate because the terms and conditions of the settlement were not really very clearly outlined to us, and it was a suggestion to make an argument that these monies could potentially be used and whatnot. I just don't think we're at that point. So I agree with the electric school bus mandate section, but not the opioid settlement to fund mental health services.
Anybody else? Rachel?
I'm completely fine with advocating for both. I mean, I guess we could get into weighing the opioid epidemic versus our students' mental health, but it seems to me that our legislator is saying that these are untouched funds just sitting there not being used for any good purpose, and I'm all in favor of this board who has duty to the school children here to try and grab it for the school children here if we can, particularly if we're going to put it to good use, and it's certainly not being used. So I would be fine with authorizing both conversations. I mean, I'm assuming if it's inappropriate use that we will be turned down, and that our legislator wouldn't be urging it if she didn't think that it was a plausible possibility and a decent use of it.
Emily?
So I am also in favor of going and discussing the electric bus mandate, and I think the way the legislator wanted the discussion to be had was that the county is going to have to play a role in this mandate and in the infrastructure and in dealing with PSE&G. So she wanted us to make sure that we made it known to the county that whatever happens, they're going to need to maybe help us with the utility. The legislator was also saying that she wanted to reach out. She wanted us present so that we can get the remaining legislature also on board and have them also be partnering with us in making a statement to the governor about the infrastructure that would be affected on an electric school bus mandate. So I am definitely in favor of that. I'm also in favor of actually having a general discussion about mental health to the county, not using the opioid settlement. That was our legislator's idea that came when we started talking with her about, there's mental health funds that are needed from school to school districts, and that the funding that came down in the state was a little bit different than it had been in the past. So it just kind of grew out of that and became, her brainstorming was, if it's an opioid settlement and it's not being used, maybe we can get you funding. So the purpose of the original comment was, does the county have funding to give to school districts for mental health education or mental health? And so I am going back to saying that I think we should say that. I would like to go, if we're going to be in front of the legislature at Nassau County, I would like to say to the Nassau County legislature, please be aware of the electric bus mandate and what your role in it will be, and please find ways to help fund mental health for our children. That's what I would state. If I went, which by the way, I will not be going because of a conflict, but if I were standing there, that's what I would say.
I'm wondering if, is mental health like the top priority for this board to be advocating to the Nassau County legislature? Meaning, do they really have anything to offer us in that regard versus
Well, they don't,
something
so,
else?
so interesting that you point that out, because a lot of the other topics that are legislative task force priorities, the legislature has absolutely nothing to do with, right? The foundation aid, they have nothing to do with any, a lot of that all is from our state legislators and with the governor, which we are working towards meeting with the governor as well. So that's how that conversation then came about, is there opportunity in some local funding county-wise, and we discussed mental health, because I know that that's kind of how it happened. It was like an organic conversation in that sense. But they don't really have any control of the county with us.
That's why I'm wondering, it seems, like, to me, the electric school buses seem to make a lot of sense to go and talk to them about, but let's see, I guess, Deb, we have Deb and Ms. Malconian as well.
Nan, why don't you go ahead?
I'm in support of the conversation about the electric vehicles. I have questions about the opioid settlement. If I'd like to understand the details of that settlement and how and whether that applies to mental health services in schools. If it does, then I don't see a reason why we would not be advocating for that for our school district as anyone else would be doing for theirs. If it feels like we're taking something from another service that's important and that it was intended for, I wouldn't be comfortable with that. But I'd really like the money if the language says that it belongs in schools.
Okay, so how about, because I'm hearing clearly, and it's interesting because Legislator Durigi Whitten actually brought up mental health, I think, on her own, and she talked about how she was very happy with the governor's budget. And then, because she said there's a good deal of money in there for mental health, and then we jumped in to say, yeah, but it's not really coming to the school districts. And then, as Ms. Bay said, then the legislator started to brainstorm, well, maybe we can find money elsewhere. So how about, as a compromise, because we've all agreed to the electric vehicle mandate. How about as a compromise? Ms. Bay suggested that we advocate, please find ways to help fund mental health. How about if between now and the meeting, I try to find out more about the opioid settlement, and if there is a possibility to use that funding for student mental health, and we're not invading the pot and taking away from the purpose, the intended beneficiaries of the settlement, then we can say something specifically about the opioid settlement funds. And if not, we can just make a very generic statement about if there is a way to help to partner with community organizations, whatever it is within the county, we need your help. How's that as a compromise?
Dr. Hines, can I ask you to opine on this? How do you think that they could, in fact, help us with mental health? Or maybe Dr. Allen?
Well, I think the first question is, do we need assistance with our students with mental health? Yes, for sure. As far as opioid addiction or any other addictions, I would need to speak a little bit more with Dr. Baer and certainly our counseling staff here. If there's any way that the county legislature can assist, that would be great. I don't know if that's more of an offline conversation first before we have it in that type of venue. But anything with mental health, I think I think what Deb was saying is a good compromise. I'm totally okay with that.
Is the rest of the board okay with the compromise?
I'm personally still with actually what Emily proposed. I like that with the.
Just saying,
I just don't feel
It's fine, we still
comfortable,
fund mental
I don't feel comfortable going and asking for, to use those funds without, trying to push to take those funds, because I really just don't have, I kind of like the county having that rainy day money. Ms. Epstein?
So we've talked in extensive detail about how challenging this electric school bus mandate is and how it's really going to involve many partnerships with utility companies, et cetera. I just think if we're going to go before them and make a statement, we shouldn't add to it mental health issues or opioid settlements, and that we should really stick to the topic at hand, since this is an actual mandate that we really do have a ticking clock with. I just think it confuses the matters, especially because the conversation of this settlement did come out of a brainstorming session, and the monies, as we know, have been sitting there for quite some time. So it's not like this, we're shutting the door and we can't have this conversation about the funds at a later date. So I still feel strongly that we should not confuse two issues. And if we're going to talk about the electric school vehicle mandate and really try and make some headway and partnerships, that should be our focus.
I agree with Julie. I agree.
I do too, and I think the opioid money is a political issue between Blakeman and some of the legislators, and I just don't want to muddy the waters on the school bus issue by bringing that up.
that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so I'm hearing the majority actually at this point say electric vehicles, yes. Let's not talk about funding for mental health, no matter where the money's coming from right now.
Yes. So you're 2.5 for 3. So let's move on, because I think we have a majority. So are you going to change people's mind, or are you, oh, okay.
No, but I'm not aimed at changing people's minds. If I could make a suggestion, I'm totally fine with this proposal, and keeping the things separate does make sense to me, especially since this electric school bus mandate has potentially a huge deleterious effect on us if it were to go into effect the way it is right now. But my suggestion would be, I actually don't think, depending on how you look at what our mental health issues are and what you're funding and how you break it down, I actually don't think that the connection between these opioid funds and some of our mental health stuff is probably as tenuous as we are making it out to be right now. And of course, in a school budget, if we had extra mental health funding for X group, we could take that funding, the funding we are currently using, and move it into other areas where we need more funding too. So I guess my suggestion would be that maybe the legislative task force and Mrs. Brooks continue to think on this idea, and maybe get further information from Dr. Hines and figure out if we, in the future, want to approach asking for some of these funds for schools, which I think would not be just for us. It would be a suggestion to, it's $20 million or something like that. And it's literally just sitting, whereas other areas have already figured out where to spend it. Is it 100 million? Okay, I thought it was less than that. It's a huge sum of money that Nassau County is not making use of right now. And so I think schools making the suggestion that some of it could be spent on schools is not necessarily a bad thing. So I guess that's all I'm adding. I'm fine with us only doing electric school buses, but I would like to see the legislative task force and Dr. Hines think about this a little further, and whether or not we want to approach it in the future.
Okay, so just to wrap up, the next legislative task force meeting is on March 9th. We will have a board meeting before that. And also, I just want to give the board a heads up. I did share the charter with the full legislative, the drafts with the full legislative task force. I did receive some comments. I will be forwarding that draft document back to the board so that we can start to answer some of the other comments, the procedural comments in there, and get this thing finalized within the next month. So you'll have homework.
Looking forward to it. Great. And finally, Emergency Preparedness Committee did not meet and is next meeting on March 6th. So moving along to item 12, can we get a motion to approve the January 9th, 2023 Policy and Personnel Committee meeting minutes, January 19th, 2023 Legislative Task Force meeting minutes, January 23rd, 2023 Budget and Facilities minutes, and January 31st, 2023 BOE meeting minutes? Oh, wow, everybody's motioning. So, Ms. Bays, I'll take the second from Ms. Epstein. All in favor? 7-0. The minutes are approved. Moving along, we'll go right to the consent agenda action items. If we could please get a motion for the approval of, and there are some gifts in here, which I will read after, 13.1.1 through 13.5.1. Motion, Dr. Block. Seconded, Ms. Melkonian. All in favor? 7-0. And a big thank you to the New York Beef Industry Council for their $250 gift, South Salem HSA for their $3,950 gift, the Manor Haven PTA for multiple gifts of $2,801, $3,650, and $3,350. Mr. David Miller for a donation of $3,500 for a fish tank and fish equipment. Hearts, a donation for $1,275.50, and $2,100 from the Guggenheim HSA. So a big thank you to all of our donors, especially the ones sitting back there. Okay. Board policy. I think this is our first reads of the year, right? Oh no, we've had first reads, or second first reads of the year. And I think, right? I think the gift policy was on first read in the beginning, and we sent it back, maybe? No first reads? Okay, well, here we are. We've got 2 first reads. Does anyone have any comments about these policies? No? Okay, so we will be voting on those at the next meeting. Moving on to old business, there was a community comment question. The individual who asked it is not in the audience today, but hopefully we'll see this answer on the recording. The question was, what is the BOE's policy for a board member holding a high-ranking officer-level role in local political parties? If there's no policy on such issue, when will one be created? What are the current mechanisms or checks and balances to prove that to the public that decisions are made in a balanced, unbiased fashion? So the answer to that question is twofold. Number one, we do have a policy. Ms. Brooks, do you know the policy number offhand? I actually didn't write that down. Anyway, we'll get that policy number.
2170, board member conflict of interest.
Thank you. So it's policy 2170, board member conflict of interest. And that does have a prohibition on board members from serving as officers of community organizations and or other organizations that seek to influence the board's decision-making as the school district's governing body. That does not apply to political organizations, as conflicts of interest arise when a board member has a pecuniary interest in a contract with a school district. There is no conflict of interest with respect to a school board member's active participation in a political party. School board members do not forfeit their constitutional rights to free speech or freedom of association when they become board members. Moreover, a board member cannot be compelled to disclose their political affiliation. This is from the district's legal counsel, and he states, as such, accordingly, no policy is required or enforceable. In response to the second part of the question, which is what are the current mechanisms or checks and balances to prove to the public that decisions are made in a balanced, unbiased fashion, again, the answer from the district's attorney is school board meetings are open to the public, votes on resolutions are made in public, and individual board member votes are a matter of public record. And unless specifically exempted, the underlying documents on which the board is taking action are publicly available. And I guess because the public has access to all of that, the check and balance would be the school board trustee elections each year. So, moving right along, is there any new business? Ms. Epstein?
I'm sorry, it just came to me in this meeting in our active conversation about mental health. So this year's proposed state budget includes $10 million, I believe, going to mental health clinics and community-based organizations with an emphasis on school districts working with those organizations to help battle this mental health crisis. Since those dollars aren't coming to us and we talk so much about mental health, if the board agrees, I would love to hear Dr. Hines or the business office or anyone's perspective on, will we be utilizing any of these mental health clinic-based services or partnerships, since we are not getting monies and funding to our school district directly to help cover this. So I asked the board if this is something that you would like the administration to look into or have answered moving forward.
That sounds, I think, like a good compromise and place to start based on our earlier conversation. So if everyone's okay with that?
Yes,
you
as a
guys-
matter of fact, it did come out
Yeah.
of our discussion, and that's
Great.
what I was alluding to earlier with the legislator. So yes,
Perfect.
I would like to see us I would like to hear what, if anything, we are doing towards those funds.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Ms. Epstein. Any other new business? Any other new business? No, okay. This is our second opportunity for the community to be heard. Nope? Okay, because everyone wants to go home today. We are not going to recess to executive session, so can I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting? Ms. Dr. Block, second Ms. Bays, all in favor? 7-0. Thank you very much, and happy Valentine's Day, everybody.